It is February 13th, 1945. Shrove Tuesday. In the city of Dresden, the last day before Lent has brought something the winter had not offered for months. A hint of warmth, a softening of the grey Saxon sky. Small children are begging to wear their carnival costumes early. Teenage girls are hurrying to hem their dresses for visits to relatives. North of the river Elbe, workers are finishing the erection of the great domed tent of the Circus Saracani. The forecast looks clear, and a full house is expected. An 8-year-old girl who lives in the city will remember it this way. Schools are closed, restaurants are full, the railway stations overflow with refugees and the wounded. But it is Shrove Tuesday, she will say. A happy day, similar to Mardi Gras in New Orleans. The refugees are everywhere now. In the past weeks, some 300,000 men, women and children have poured into Dresden, fleeing the advance of the Red Army into Silesia. They crowd the churches and the squares and the waiting rooms. They carry what they could grab. They are terrified, not of Dresden, but of what they left behind. In Dresden, they believe, they are safe. The permanent residents, 642,000 of them, believe it too. At 9:51 in the evening, the air raid sirens sound. The people of Dresden barely hurry. They look up into the dark February sky. There are no blue-white searchlights sweeping the darkness. No anti-aircraft guns hammering at anything overhead. No flak bursts scattering red sparks across the clouds. Nothing, just the dark. And in that darkness, something is already descending. Dresden sits on the Elbe in a wide basin between gentle, forested hills 120 miles south of Berlin. Before the war, it was called Florence on the Elbe, and not without reason. The Frauenkirche, the Church of Our Lady, rises from the Altstadt in a stone dome that has stood since the 18th century. The Zwinger Palace complex spreads its Baroque courtyards across the city's heart, commissioned by Augustus the Strong, Elector of Saxony. In the Semper Gallery hang Raphael and Titian, Rembrandt and Van Dyck. The city's musical tradition, the Philharmonic, the Kreuzschule Choir, has outlasted every political convulsion of the past century. It is the 7th largest city in Germany, ancient capital of Saxony, a place people speak of in the same breath as Vienna and Florence, as if certain cities exist in a different category above the ordinary cruelties of the world. The people of Dresden had built an entire theory of safety on this idea. Some said Churchill had an aunt who lived in the city. Others said the Allies intended to make Dresden the capital of post-war Germany, too useful to destroy. Many simply believed that no rational power would bomb a place of such beauty, such cultural gravity, such irreplaceable art. What they did not know, what almost none of them knew, was that Dresden's air defenses had been stripped. The anti-aircraft guns had been requisitioned for the Eastern Front. The last major flak battery had left in January 1945. The city that its residents believed was being protected by its own beauty had been left without a single gun. There was nothing to fire into that empty sky. This is why the people barely hurry. The absence of gunfire has been their evidence of safety. For months, the silence overhead has meant we are untouchable. They are still reading the silence the same way when the first flares begin to fall. Dresden was also, though its residents chose not to dwell on this, a major communications hub. Its railway marshalling yard was the 3rd largest in Germany. Tracks from Berlin, Prague, Breslau, Warsaw, Leipzig and Nuremberg converged here. 127 factories occupied the city's outskirts, engaged in precision work on optical instruments and weaponry. The city that felt like a museum had the skeleton of an industrial and logistical center beneath its Baroque skin. In a flat somewhere in the Altstadt, a man writes in his diary. His name is Victor Klemperer. He is 63 years old a Jewish academic who has survived in Dresden because his wife, Eva, is an ethnic German and because he served Germany in the previous war. These facts have kept him alive when most of his friends and colleagues were taken. Not indefinitely. On the morning of this same Shrove Tuesday, the day of the children in their costumes, Klemperer received his deportation order. He is to report on February 16th, 3 days from now. He writes, he does not know what is coming tonight, nor does anyone else in Dresden. To understand how the bombers came to be in the air above Dresden on this particular Tuesday in February, it is necessary to understand a man who is at his headquarters in High Wycombe, west of London. He is 52 years old, broad-shouldered, grey-mustached, with round-framed glasses and the deliberate expression of a man who had settled something long ago. His name is Air Chief Marshal Arthur Travers Harris, and he is the Commander-in-Chief of RAF Bomber Command. Harris grew up in Rhodesia, served on the Western Front, learned to fly, and watched a generation of British infantry fed into the mud of France and Belgium. He drew one conclusion from that experience, and he spent the next 30 years turning it into a doctrine. The way to win a war without repeating the Somme was to destroy the enemy's ability and will to fight. From the air, at night, systematically, at scale. When he took command of Bomber Command in February 1942, he found the doctrine already in place. He pursued it without apology. His crews called him Butch. The press called him Bomber. The two names describe two different assessments of the same man. In October 1943, Harris committed his philosophy to paper in an internal memo that left nothing ambiguous. The aim of the bomber offensive, he wrote, should be unambiguously stated as the destruction of German cities, the killing of German workers, and the disruption of civilized life throughout Germany. The destruction of houses, utilities, transport, and lives. The creation of a refugee problem on an unprecedented scale. These are, he wrote, accepted and intended aims of our bombing policy. They are not byproducts of attempts to hit factories. This is not a document recovered against his wishes. Harris wrote it, filed it, and stood behind it. He believed it. He had been acting on it for more than a year before he set it down in writing. The proof was Hamburg. In the summer of 1943, Operation Gomorrah combined RAF night bombing with American daylight raids over several days, and what resulted was something the Germans had no word for. The firestorm, the firestorm. The fires grew so intense that the updraft of superheated air pulled the individual blazes into a single thermal engine, drawing cold air in at ground level at speeds approaching 155 miles an hour. The asphalt burned. Trees exploded from their own resin. The temperature reached 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Approximately 46,000 people died in Hamburg. Harris understood Hamburg as a proof of concept. What had been demonstrated once could be repeated. Dresden was coming. The only question was the political machinery that would set it in motion. The Red Army crosses the Oder River on the 8th of February, 1945. Its forward positions just 70 kilometers from Berlin. In London, a Joint Intelligence Subcommittee report lands on Churchill's desk, eyes only, predicting German collapse as early as mid-April if the Soviets break through, or a war continuing until November if they don't. The fear in the Allied High Command is not triumphalism. The Battle of the Bulge ended less than 3 weeks ago. Nobody is certain the war is won. A shelved plan, code-name Operation Thunderclap, a mass attack on Berlin and the eastern German cities, is revived. On January 27th, Deputy Chief of the Air Staff Norman Bottomley sends Harris a directive. Prepare attacks on Berlin, Dresden, Leipzig, and Chemnitz. The intent carries a second layer, rarely discussed. Assist the Soviet advance? Yes. But also demonstrate to Stalin's observers the scale of what Western air power can do. On February 4th, Churchill arrives at Yalta for the conference that will divide the post-war world. Stalin's first question, according to Leo McKinstry's account, is direct. "Why haven't you bombed Dresden?" Churchill assures him. It is coming. The Bomber Command briefing notes issued to crews on the evening of February 13th described Dresden as the 7th largest city in Germany and far the largest untouched built-up area the enemy has got. The notes cite the railway hub, the administrative functions, the roofs at a premium with refugees pressing westward. They use the language of operational planning, which is precise and clean and empty, of the things it is about to destroy. At bomber stations across eastern England, 772 Lancaster crews begin their pre-flight checks. 4 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines per aircraft, 102-foot wingspan. In the bomb bays, 4,000-pound cookie blast bombs, designed to shatter roofs and expose the timber beneath, followed by 30-pound incendiary sticks to ignite what the blast bombs have uncovered. It is not a crude weapon. It is an engineered sequence. First, a deception. 360 heavy bombers are dispatched toward Berlin, 60 miles from Dresden, to strike a synthetic oil plant. 71 mosquitoes go to Magdeburg. Nuisance raids scatter across Germany. Radar operators in the Reich's night fighter network are tracking dozens of incoming streams. By the time they isolate Dresden, there is nothing left to intercept. The Pathfinders arrive first. De Havilland mosquitoes, lighter and faster, carrying colored flares. Green markers fall to define the bounds of the city center. 100 white magnesium flares follow, flooding the ground below with cold light. Then the red target indicators, concentrated near the football stadium just west of the Elbe. From the ground, the falling flares must look almost festive. Green and white and red, drifting through the dark sky on a February night. The people in the shelters look up through whatever gap they can find and try to understand what they are seeing. The 240 Lancasters of the first wave cross the city at between 15 and 20,000 feet. Practically no opposition, no anti-aircraft fire from below. Crews later describe it as the most uncontested target they have ever flown. The cookies detonate, roofs explode outward, timbers are exposed, centuries-old buildings in the dense medieval Altstadt stand open to the sky, their interiors suddenly available to whatever comes next. Then the incendiaries cascade across the exposed beams and the dry interior floors, and what was a city begins to become something else. The Frauenkirche catches. The Swinger burns. The Semper Opera fills with fire. Beneath the slaughterhouse on the far side of the city, in a stone cellar refrigerated with sides of beef, a 22-year-old American prisoner of war named Kurt Vonnegut sits and listens. He had been captured in the Battle of the Bulge and transported to Dresden by rail. He will later describe what he heard that night as giants walking across the earth. First at the city's edges, then closer, then overhead. The hanging beef swings on its hooks. White dust falls from the ceiling. Somewhere across the burning Altstadt, Victor Klemperer is in a shelter. 3 days from deportation. The operations record of 75 New Zealand squadron notes. The whole town was well alight and could see the glow of fires 10 miles away on return. And then, a highly successful raid. The first wave wheels away north and west, back toward England. The city burns. The emergency services move in. Rescue teams, medical units, military personnel. They pour into the burning Altstadt from every direction. The Dresden Fire Service, severely outmatched, begins the impossible work of containing what cannot be contained. They have 3 hours. This was not an accident of timing. The interval between the first and second RAF waves had been planned from the beginning. 3 hours, long enough for rescue workers to fill the streets, not long enough for the fires to die. At approximately 1:30 in the morning of February 14th, 773 Lancasters approach Dresden from the northwest. They do not need pathfinders. The city is a beacon. The firestorm is visible for 100 miles in every direction, a tower of fire and smoke rising into the dark sky over Saxony. The second wave finds the aiming point by following the light. 1,181 tons of incendiary bombs. 1,477 tons of high explosive dropped onto a city already burning, into streets already crowded with the people who came to help. The firestorm, fed by the second wave, spreads to the inner suburbs. It becomes self-sustaining, drawing in cold air at ground level, superheating it, throwing it skyward, pulling more cold air behind it in a continuous cycle. Winds at street level approach hurricane force. The Altstadt's medieval fabric, its narrow streets and centuries of accumulated timber and stone, has become a furnace beyond anything a fire service can approach. Victor Klemperer survives. He does not yet know what has happened to his deportation order. He does not yet know that the administrative infrastructure of the state that had been processing him toward his death is burning. He does not yet know that he will walk out of this. At noon on February 14th, Ash Wednesday now, 316 American B-17 Flying Fortresses of the 8th Air Force arrive over Dresden. The smoke towers are still shooting 15,000 feet into the air. The city is almost invisible beneath them. The B-17 crews have enormous difficulty finding targets. They hit the marshalling yard. They also hit residential areas that are still somehow standing. 2 days later, on February 15th, a follow-up American strike comes through heavy cloud cover, aimed by H-2X radar at a city that barely exists anymore as a navigable target. Bombs fall on the southeastern suburbs and on the nearby towns of Meissen and Pirna. When the accounting is complete, 772 RAF heavy bombers, 527 USAAF, more than 3,900 tons of ordnance across 4 raids in 48 hours. RAF bomber commands losses, 6 Lancasters shot down, 6 aircraft. The city had offered almost no resistance. There was nothing left to resist with. What those numbers actually meant took longer to reckon. The firestorm generated temperatures reaching 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Historian Donald Miller describes what this produced at street level. Shoes melted into the hot asphalt, the fire moving so fast that some people were reduced to ash before they could remove them. Iron and steel liquefied. Stone turned to powder. 70% of the victims did not die in flames. They suffocated, killed by carbon monoxide discharged by the combustion in the cellars where they had gone to be safe. Bodies were mummified or reduced entirely to ash, which made counting impossible. The hospitals that remained standing could not handle the scale of the injured. Mass burials became necessary. Joseph Goebbels announced a death toll of 250,000. In March 1945, the German government ordered its press to report 200,000. These figures were fabrications, useful to a regime that needed to portray Dresden as a deliberate atrocity against the German people, and later useful to the East German Communist government, which had every interest in keeping the wound open as a permanent indictment of Anglo-American barbarism. The modern German far right still invokes Dresden's Holocaust of bombs. In 2010, a commission established by the city of Dresden reviewed the available evidence. Their finding, between 22,700 and 25,000 dead, 8 square miles destroyed, large enough to be catastrophic, specific enough to be true. An artist named Wilhelm Rudolph had lost his studio in the attack. His life's work, decades of painting, burned with it. He was 55 years old. He began almost immediately. The Wehrmacht had sealed the city against looters, but Rudolph was granted a special permit. He walked the streets block by block, drawing the ruins with systematic patience. By the end of 1945, nearly 200 drawings. He would transfer them to woodcuts after the war. They remained the most complete visual record of what Dresden looked like in the months after the fire, the work of a man who had nothing left to lose and chose to witness. Kurt Vonnegut climbed out of the slaughterhouse cellar and looked at the surface of the moon. Those were his words for it. He carried the experience for 24 years before he could make it into a book. When Slaughterhouse 5 appeared in 1969, it delivered the bombing of Dresden to a generation who had never heard of Operation Thunderclap, and who had no way of knowing that the declared military justification for the raid had been dissolved within 72 hours. Railroad operations at Dresden resumed within 3 days of the bombing, the third largest marshalling yard in Germany. The convergence of tracks from Berlin and Prague and Warsaw and Leipzig, the primary military rationale cited in the briefing notes, was running again before the week was out. 25,000 dead, 8 square miles destroyed, 6 Lancasters lost, and the trains were running again in 3 days. 2 days after the raids, at an off-the-record press briefing at Supreme Headquarters, British Air Commodore Colin Grierson told journalists that the aim of Operation Thunderclap had been to bomb large population centers and prevent relief supplies from getting through. Howard Cowan of the Associated Press filed the story. The Allies had resorted to terror bombing. Newspaper editorials followed. In the House of Commons, Richard Stokes, a long-time opponent of strategic bombing, asked questions. Winston Churchill sat down to write a memo to the British Chiefs of Staff. It is March 1945. 6 weeks have passed since he assured Stalin at Yalta that Dresden was coming. He writes, "The destruction of Dresden remains a serious query against the conduct of Allied bombing. I'm of the opinion that military objectives must henceforward be more strictly studied in our own interests rather than that of the enemy. A serious query against the conduct of Allied bombing, written by the man who had asked Stalin, 'When are you going to bomb Dresden?' Harris read this and replied in writing. His memo to the Air Ministry states, 'I assume that the view under consideration is something like this. No doubt in the past we were justified in attacking German cities, but to do so was always repugnant, and now that the Germans are beaten anyway, we can properly abstain from proceeding with these attacks. This is a doctrine to which I could never subscribe. Attacks on cities, like any other act of war, are intolerable unless they are strategically justified. But they are strategically justified insofar as they tend to shorten the war and preserve the lives of Allied soldiers. To my mind, we have absolutely no right to give them up unless it is certain that they will not have this effect." Harris had written in October 1943 that the killing of German workers and the destruction of German cities were accepted and intended aims. He had carried those aims out. He had been ordered to carry them out by the same political authority now calling them a serious query. He did not pretend otherwise. He never pretended otherwise. Churchill withdrew his original memo under pressure from the Chiefs of Staff. A revised memo appeared, narrower, focused on British interests rather than moral scruple. The word query disappeared. The original remained in the archive. Harris retired in September 1945. Bomber Command was denied a separate campaign medal, the only major RAF command so denied. Harris refused a peerage in protest. He was the sole commander-in-chief to refuse. He went to South Africa. He returned to Britain in the 1950s and spent his last decades quietly in rural Oxfordshire. He died in 1984. In his post-war memoir, he wrote that the attack on Dresden was at the time considered a military necessity by much more important people than myself. In 1992, a statue of Harris was unveiled outside the RAF Church of St. Clement Danes in London by the Queen Mother. She looked surprised when the crowd jeered. "Harris was a war criminal," someone shouted. He was the man holding the grenade his superiors had handed him. In the chaos of February 14th, in the roiling crowds of survivors and refugees, Victor Klemperer finds his wife Eva. All of them are moving, trying to put distance between themselves and the ruins. Klemperer reaches up and removes the yellow star from his coat. The deportation order, issued on the morning of February 13th, no longer has machinery behind it. The offices are burned. The files are ash. The administrative infrastructure of the state that had been processing him toward his death has been destroyed along with everything else. In his diary, he writes of burning beams that fell on Aryans and non-Aryans alike, of Jew and Christian meeting the same firestorm. Those Jews who survived that night, he writes, found themselves suddenly free, because in the general chaos, they could escape the Gestapo. The bombs that killed 25,000 people saved his life. British philosopher A.C. Grayling described the area bombing campaign as an immoral act and a moral crime because destroying everything contravenes every principle debated in connection with the just conduct of war. Though he concluded it is not strictly correct to call it a war crime. Historian Donald Bloxham states plainly, the bombing of Dresden on February 13th and 14th, 1945, was a war crime. It has never been prosecuted. Whether it constitutes, one remains an open and serious question, turning on facts that are not disputed and on moral frameworks that are. 10 days after Dresden, the Allies bombed Pforzheim. 20,000 dead, a name almost entirely unknown outside specialist circles. The following month, American B-29s firebombed Tokyo. Over 100,000 casualties. Between 300,000 and 600,000 German civilians died across the entire Allied bombing campaign. Dresden was catastrophic. It was not exceptional. It was the product of a doctrine written down in October 1943 and pursued without interruption until the German surrender. The Dresden Frauenkirche burned in the first wave of February 13th and collapsed in the heat the following morning. The ruins stood in the center of the city for decades, preserved by the East German state as a deliberate memorial to destruction. Reconstruction began in 1994. The church was reconsecrated in 2005, 60 years after the bombs, rebuilt stone by stone from the rubble and from new materials that no one has tried to disguise. At the very top of the rebuilt dome, there is a gold cross. It was made in London. It was paid for by British donations through an organization called the Dresden Trust, committed to strengthening relations between Britain and Germany. On October 22, 2005, it was placed at the apex of the rebuilt Frauenkirche spire. The nation whose bombers destroyed the church built the cross that now stands above it. The cross catches the light over Dresden. And somewhere in the archive, the bomber command briefing notes still read, "Far the largest untouched built-up area the enemy has got